The stars were dying, and Admiral Kethvar knew it was his fault. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching another solar system turn black on the display screen. 3 billion lives gone in a matter of hours. The Voidborn had fed again. "We're getting reports from the Outer Rim colonies," his communications officer said, her voice shaking. "The Voidborn fleet is moving toward the Centauri sector. They'll reach it in 2 days." Kethvar closed his 4 eyes and tried to think. The Alterian fleet had been fighting the Voidborn for 6 months now, and they had not won a single battle. Every weapon they used seemed to make the enemy stronger. Energy blasts, plasma cannons, particle beams, the Voidborn ships absorbed it all and grew more powerful. "How many ships do we have left?" he asked. 47 combat vessels, sir. Down from 300 at the start of the war. The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what those numbers meant. The Galactic Coalition was losing, and losing badly. Soon there would be nothing left but empty space where their civilizations once thrived. Lieutenant Commander Zara walked over to the Admiral. She was young for her rank, but the war had killed most of the older officers. "Sir, perhaps we should consider the emergency protocols. Contact species outside the Coalition." Kethvar had been thinking the same thing for weeks. The Coalition had rules about contacting primitive species. They were supposed to let civilizations develop naturally, without interference. But desperate times called for desperate measures. "Send the distress signal," he said finally. "Full spectrum broadcast. Tell them we need military assistance against an existential threat, sir. Should we limit it to civilized sectors?" The Admiral looked at the star map, showing all the dead worlds. "No, send it everywhere, even the barbarian systems. We need fighters, not philosophers." Across the galaxy, thousands of species received the message. Most ignored it. Some were too primitive to understand it. Others were too afraid to help. But on a small blue world in a violent spiral arm that most civilized races avoided, something heard the call. Earth's Deep Space Monitoring Station picked up the alien. Transmission at 14:30 Greenwich Mean Time. The signal was weak but clear, and it was definitely not human in origin. Dr. Alex Turner, the station's lead scientist, ran the data through every translation program they had. "This is impossible," he muttered, staring at his computer screen. "They're asking for military help against something called the Voidborn. They say their entire civilization is dying." Within an hour, the message was on General Kate Morrison's desk at United Defense Command. She read it twice, then called an emergency meeting. The room filled with Earth's top military leaders, scientists, and politicians. "Let me understand this correctly," said Secretary of Defense John Roberts. "Aliens are real. They're fighting a war, and they're losing badly enough to ask random strangers for help." Dr. Turner nodded. "The translation is crude, but the meaning is clear. They're facing extinction. They've tried everything they can think of, and nothing works. They're asking anyone who can fight to help them." General Morrison studied the translated message. She had spent 30 years in the military, fighting in conflicts across Earth. She knew what desperation looked like, even when it came from alien minds. "What do we know about these Voidborns?" she asked. "Not much. The message says they consume life force and can absorb energy weapons. They've been dormant for 1,000,000 years and recently woke up. Everything else is unclear." Admiral Jake Collins, head of Earth's space fleet, leaned forward. "If these aliens are advanced enough for interstellar communication, why can't they handle their own problems?" "Maybe they're not fighters," Morrison said. "Maybe they're like some of our own civilizations that focused on peace and science instead of warfare." The room was quiet as everyone considered this. Earth had no such luxury. Humanity had been fighting wars for thousands of years. Every advance in technology had been matched by advances in ways to kill other humans. Peace was something they achieved through superior firepower, not good intentions. "What kind of help are they asking for?" asked Colonel Steve Murphy, Earth's Special Operations Commander. Dr. Turner pulled up another section of the message. "Military assistance, ships, weapons, soldiers. They're not asking for food or medicine. They want warriors." "Do we even have the technology to reach them?" Roberts asked. Admiral Collins nodded. The new fusion drives can get us there. It would take 3 months, but it's possible. The real question is whether we should go. General Morrison looked around the room. These were people who had spent their careers preparing for threats that might never come. Now they were faced with a real crisis, and it wasn't even on their own world. They asked for help, she said finally, from anyone who could provide it. That includes us, sir. We don't know anything about these aliens. They could be lying. This could be a trap. Morrison stood up and walked to the large display showing Earth from space. Her homeworld looked peaceful from up here, but she knew better. Humanity had survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and disasters that would have destroyed weaker species. They had learned to fight not because they enjoyed it, but because the alternative was extinction. Colonel Murphy, what's our current military readiness? We have 12 battle cruisers ready for deep space deployment, 200 fighter craft, 15,000 combat troops trained for hostile environment operations, plus all our experimental weapons systems. Dr. Turner, how long to prepare a full translation system for real-time communication? If I work around the clock, maybe 2 weeks. Morrison made her decision. Admiral Collins, prepare the fleet. We're going to answer their call for help. Sir Roberts interrupted. Shouldn't we discuss this with the civilian government first? We're the government when it comes to matters of planetary defense. And if these Voidborn are as dangerous as the message suggests, they won't stop with one species. Eventually, they'll find Earth. The meeting broke up with everyone rushing to prepare for humanity's first interstellar military operation. But as the officers filed out, Dr. Turner stayed behind. General, there's something else in the message you should know about. What is it? The way they describe their ideal rescuer. They're looking for heroes, saviors, noble warriors who fight with honor and respect the laws of civilized warfare. Morrison almost smiled. Dr. Turner, I don't think they understand what they're asking for. What do you mean? The general looked out the window at the peaceful-looking Earth below. They want heroes, knights in shining armor, who'll ride in and save the day with honor and dignity. That's not what we are. Then what are we? Morrison's expression grew cold as she remembered all the wars, all the necessary evils, all the times humanity had done terrible things for the right reasons. We're what you call when the heroes have already failed. We're the monsters you send to kill other monsters. 3 days later, the Earth fleet launched toward distant stars. 12 ships loaded with weapons that no civilized species would ever dream of building. Soldiers trained to fight wars that no peaceful race could imagine. And officers who understood that sometimes, to save lives. You had to be willing to destroy everything that threatened them. The aliens had called for saviors. But Earth was sending something much more dangerous. They were sending humans who had learned long ago that survival was more important than honor, and victory was more important than being liked. The galaxy was about to meet its new protectors. Nothing would ever be the same again. In the cold space between stars, the human fleet traveled toward a war they didn't understand, to save people they had never met, using methods that would horrify the very aliens. They were coming to rescue, but that was tomorrow's problem. Today, Earth had answered the call, and the monsters were on their way. The human fleet arrived at the Coalition staging ground near the Kepler system exactly 3 months after leaving. Earth Admiral Cathfar waited nervously on his bridge as the alien ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel. He had been hoping 4 elegant vessels filled with noble warriors would restore honor to this terrible war. What he saw instead made his blood run cold. The human ships looked nothing like Coalition vessels. Where Alterian ships were smooth and graceful, built for exploration and peaceful contact, the human fleet resembled flying weapons platforms. Every surface bristled with gun turrets, missile ports, and armor plating. The largest ship, which had to be their flagship, looked like it had been designed for one purpose only, to destroy everything it encountered. By the ancestors, whispered Lieutenant Commander Zara. What kind of species builds ships like that? Admiral Jake Collins broadcast a message from the human flagship U.S. Vengeance. His face appeared on the Coalition screens, and the aliens got their first look at humanity's military commander. Collins was older than most of his officers, with gray hair and scars on his face that spoke of many battles. His uniform was plain, dark blue with minimal decoration, very different from the ornate ceremonial dress that Coalition officers wore. "This is Admiral Collins of the Earth Fleet. We received your distress signal. Where do you want us to start killing the enemy?" Directness of the question shocked the Coalition officers. There was no diplomatic greeting, no discussion of terms or conditions, just a simple question about combat operations. Kethvar managed to compose himself. "Admiral Collins, welcome to Coalition Space. We're grateful for your response to our call for assistance. Perhaps we could arrange a meeting to discuss strategy and coordinate our forces." "Fine, my ship can accommodate your delegation. Come aboard when you're ready." An hour later, Kethvar and his senior staff shuttled over to the human flagship. What they found inside was even more disturbing than the ship's exterior. The corridors were narrow and functional, with no artwork or decoration. Everything was designed for efficiency, not beauty. Human crew members moved with quick precision, checking weapon systems and running combat drills. The meeting room was sparse and cold. Admiral Collins sat at a metal table with his officers, all of them wearing the same practical uniforms. There were no ceremony or formal introductions, just business. "Show us the enemy," Collins said, without preamble. Kethvar activated a holographic display showing the Voidborn ships. The creatures were massive, dark vessels that seemed to absorb light around them. "These are our opponents. They feed on life force and can absorb most forms of energy. Our weapons have proven ineffective." Captain Lisa Brooks, commander of the human marine assault ship used Predator, studied the images carefully. She was younger than Collins, but had the same hard expression in her eyes. "How do they move? How do they communicate?" "We don't know of any weak points," Zara said. "That's why we sent the distress signal. Our science teams have been studying them for months without success." Dr. Emma Watson, the human fleet's military psychologist, spoke up. "You've been studying them instead of fighting them?" The Coalition officers looked confused. "Of course we study our opponents. How else can we develop effective countermeasures? We believe in understanding before acting." Humans exchanged glances that the aliens didn't understand. To the Coalition, the human expressions looked almost predatory. "Let me see your tactical reports," said Colonel Steve Murphy. Earth's Special Operations Commander, Kethvar, provided data files showing 6 months of Coalition battles against the Voidborn. The humans read through them quickly, and their reactions were not encouraging. Collins shook his head. Brooks looked disgusted. Murphy just stared. "This is how you fight wars," Brooks asked finally. "What do you mean? Send messages before attacking, warning them to surrender? You avoid targeting command ships if there might be civilians aboard. You withdraw when you start taking casualties. You're fighting like this is some kind of sporting event." Lieutenant Commander Zara bristled. "We are a civilized species. Follow the laws of warfare. We don't target non-combatants or use excessive force." "Excessive force?" Murphy laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're facing extinction, and you're worried about using excessive force?" Dr. Watson leaned forward. "Let me make sure I understand your situation. These Voidborn have destroyed dozens of your worlds. They've killed billions of your people. They show no interest in negotiation or surrender. And you're still trying to fight them according to civilized rules. Of course. What else would we do?" The human officers looked at each other again. Collins sighed and stood up. "Admiral Kethvar, I think there's been a misunderstanding. When you sent that distress signal asking for warriors, what exactly did you expect? You expected military forces that could help us defeat the Voidborn while maintaining our principles and values. Heroes who could turn the tide of battle through superior tactics and noble conduct." Brooks laughed out loud. "Heroes? Noble conduct? You called the wrong species for that? What do you mean?" Collins walked to the display showing the Voidborn ships. "These things don't care about your principles. They don't respect your laws of warfare. They're trying to exterminate you, and you're worried about fighting fair. So what do you suggest? We kill them. All of them. Every ship, every creature, everything that might threaten you again. Don't study them or try to understand them or hope they'll see reason. We end the threat permanently. The Coalition officers recoiled in horror. You're talking about genocide, Zara whispered. I'm talking about survival, Collins replied coldly. Your survival. If you want to preserve your civilization and your values, you need to be alive to do it. Dr. Watson activated another display showing human military doctrine. On Earth, we learned long ago that some enemies can't be reasoned with. Some threats are existential. When something tries to wipe out your entire species, you don't fight fair. You fight to win. The images showed human weapon systems that made the Coalition officers sick to look at. Kinetic bombardment platforms that could crack planets. Nuclear warheads designed to destroy entire fleets. Biological weapons that could sterilize worlds. Don't use these weapons lightly, Murphy explained. But we build them because sometimes you face an enemy that gives you no choice, and you think the Voidborn are such an enemy, Kethvar asked. Based on your own reports? Yes, they're not trying to conquer you or negotiate with you. They're trying to eat you. That makes this simple. Brooks pulled up tactical data on the human fleet. We brought 12 battle cruisers equipped with kinetic weapons. The Voidborn absorb energy, but they can't absorb a chunk of tungsten moving. At 10% of light speed, we also brought experimental weapons designed specifically for energy-based life forms, Collins added. Things your civilized minds probably never considered building. The Coalition delegation sat in stunned silence. They had called for help, but these humans were offering something far beyond what they had imagined. It's not just military assistance, but a complete change in how the war would be fought. There's something else you need to understand, Dr. Watson said quietly. Once we start fighting this war our way, there's no going back. We don't do limited engagements or proportional responses. We fight until the threat is eliminated completely. What? Are you saying Collins met the Admiral's eyes? We're saying that if you want our help, you need to accept that we're going to fight this war like humans fight wars? That means doing things that will probably horrify you. Things that will save your civilization but might cost you your innocence. The room was quiet for a long moment. Outside, through the viewport, they could see both fleets floating in space. The Coalition ships looked elegant and peaceful even now. The human ships looked like weapons waiting to be fired. Do we have a choice? Kethvar asked finally. There's always a choice, Brooks replied. You can keep fighting your way and go extinct with honor. Or you can let us fight our way and live to question whether it was worth it. The Coalition officers conferred quietly among themselves. Their whispered conversation was urgent and desperate. Finally, Kethvar turned back to the humans. What do you need from us? Collins smiled for the first time since the meeting began. But it wasn't a pleasant expression. Target information. Supply lines. And the understanding that when this is over, you're not going to like what you've seen us do. But we'll be alive to not like it, Zara said quietly. That's the idea. Meeting ended with both fleets preparing for joint operations against the Voidborn. But as the Coalition officers returned to their ships, they carried with them a growing understanding that they had invited something dangerous into their war. The humans weren't heroes. They weren't saviors in any sense the Coalition understood. They were predators who had learned to kill efficiently and without remorse. And that, fortunately, was exactly what the galaxy needed. The first joint operation against the Voidborn took place 3 days after the human fleet arrived. A Voidborn scouting group of 5 ships had been detected moving toward a Coalition mining colony. Admiral Kethvar suggested a standard Coalition response. Send a diplomatic message offering terms, then engage with minimal force to avoid civilian casualties. Admiral Collins had different ideas. We hit them hard and fast before they know we're there, he said during the joint briefing. No warnings, no negotiations. We destroy all 5 ships before they can report back to their main fleet. But what if they want to surrender? Asked. Lieutenant Commander Zara, Captain Lisa Brooks, looked at her like she had said something insane. Energy parasites don't surrender. They feed. That's what they do. The human and Coalition fleets moved into position. The aliens watched in fascination as the human ships performed maneuvers they had never seen before. Instead of approaching, in formation, the human vessels spread out in a complex pattern that seemed random but clearly wasn't. "They're hunting," whispered Commander Tech-9, the Coalition's tactical officer. "Look at how they move. They're not engaging in honorable combat. They're stalking prey." The Voidborn ships detected the incoming fleets and began their standard energy absorption protocols. Their dark holes glowed as they prepared to feed on whatever weapons came their way. But the Coalition had learned to fear that glow. Collins gave the order to attack. The human ships didn't fire energy weapons. Instead, they launched simple metal projectiles accelerated to incredible speeds by magnetic rails. Chunks of tungsten and steel moving at 10% of light speed struck the Voidborn vessels before the creatures even understood what was happening. The effect was devastating. The Voidborn ships, designed to absorb and feed on energy, had no defense against raw kinetic force. The first ship simply exploded when 3 tungsten rounds punched through its hull. The second ship tried to maneuver away, but took a direct hit from the U.S. Predator that tore it in half. "By the ancestors," breathed Admiral Kethvar, "they're not even fighting back." "They can't," said Brooks over the communication channel. "They've never faced an enemy that doesn't use energy weapons. They don't know how to respond to kinetic bombardment." The remaining 3 Voidborn ships lasted less than 2 minutes. The human fleet methodically destroyed each one with the same cold precision they might use to demolish old buildings. It was no drama, no heroic maneuvering, no desperate battles. Just efficient destruction. When the engagement ended, the Coalition officers sat in stunned silence. They had been fighting the Voidborn for 6 months without a single victory. The humans had just destroyed 5 enemy ships without taking any damage at all. "How did you know that would work?" Zara asked. Colonel Steve Murphy answered from his position aboard the U.S. Vengeance. "We didn't know. But when someone tells you their enemy absorbs energy, you try something that isn't energy. Basic tactical thinking." "But what if it hadn't worked?" "Then we would have tried something else until we found what did work. That's how you fight a war." Dr. Emma Watson's voice came through the communication system. "You've been approaching this conflict like a civilized disagreement between reasonable parties. But the Voidborn aren't reasonable. They're a force of nature that needs to be stopped, not understood." The success of the first engagement led to more joint operations. Each time, the humans used methods that shocked their Coalition allies. Captain Helen Rodriguez commanded a stealth frigate that didn't engage in honorable ship-to-ship combat. Instead, she hunted individual Voidborn vessels through asteroid fields, using patience and cunning to isolate and destroy them one by one. "This isn't warfare," complained Commander Tech-9 after watching Rodriguez stalk a Voidborn heavy cruiser for 6 hours before finally attacking. "This is assassination." "It's effective," replied Major Tim Foster from his position aboard Rodriguez's ship. "Dead enemies can't hurt civilians. That's all that matters." The Coalition's discomfort grew as they witnessed more of human military doctrine. When the Voidborn attempted to use captured alien civilians as human shields, expecting mercy from the attacking forces, Foster calmly ordered the attack to continue anyway. "You're killing innocent people," Zara protested over the communication channel. "The innocent people are already dead," Foster replied coldly. "The Voidborn don't take prisoners. They take food. Every minute we delay costs more lives on other worlds." The Coalition officers watched in horror as human ships fired directly through the civilian vessels to destroy the Voidborn ships behind them. It was tactically sound and strategically necessary, but it violated every principle of civilized warfare. Dr. Rachel Collins, working with human military scientists, began developing new weapons specifically designed to disrupt Voidborn energy patterns. But where Coalition scientists sought to understand their enemy, the humans simply wanted to find better ways to kill them. "Look at this data," she explained to a mixed group of human and alien officers. "The Voidborn communicate through energy pulses. If we can jam those frequencies, we can blind and confuse them." "Fascinating," said the Coalition's chief scientist. "We could learn so much about their culture and social structure." We could also use it to make them easier to kill, Collins replied. Which is more important right now? The psychological warfare began when humans started broadcasting. The dying screams of Voidborn across their communication frequencies. Every time they destroyed an enemy ship, they recorded the sounds of its death and transmitted them to other Voidborn vessels in the area. Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos explained the tactic to disgusted coalition officers. Fear is a weapon. If they're afraid, they make mistakes. Mistakes get them killed faster. But this is torture, protested Admiral Cathfar. You're causing psychological trauma to a sentient species. A sentient species that's trying to eat your entire civilization, Santos replied. Would you rather have traumatized enemies or dead friends? As human tactics proved devastatingly effective, the Coalition faced an uncomfortable truth. Their saviors were winning the war. But they were doing it through methods that challenged everything the Coalition believed about proper conduct. The humans didn't fight with honor. They fought with ruthless efficiency. They didn't seek glorious victory. They sought complete destruction of the enemy.
Ow.
They didn't care about being heroes. They cared about being effective. Major Foster led a boarding party assault on a damaged Voidborn vessel. Instead of trying to capture prisoners or gather intelligence, his team simply planted explosive charges throughout the ship and evacuated. When Coalition officers asked why he didn't try to learn more about the enemy, his answer was simple. We already know everything we need to know. They're hostile, they're dangerous, and they die when you blow them up. What else matters? Captain Rodriguez developed new stealth tactics that involved hiding human ships inside the debris of destroyed Coalition vessels. When Voidborn scavenger ships came to feed on the wreckage, they found human weapons waiting for them. You're using our dead as bait, accused Commander Tech-9. I'm using available resources to eliminate threats, Rodriguez replied. Your dead are already gone. But if their sacrifice can save the living, then they haven't died in vain. The psychological impact on Coalition forces was severe. Dr. Watson conducted regular briefings to help alien officers cope with what they were seeing. Many reported nightmares about human combat tactics. Some requested transfers away from joint operations. You have to understand, Watson explained to a group of traumatized Coalition officers. Humans don't fight wars for sport or honor or glory. We fight wars to end them, permanently. But the results spoke for themselves. In 2 weeks of joint operations, the human Coalition forces had destroyed more Voidborn ships than the Coalition had managed in 6 months of fighting alone. Entire systems were being cleared of the enemy. Civilian populations were being saved. The cost was the Coalition's innocence. It called for heroes and received killers. It asked for saviors and gotten monsters. But those monsters were winning the war that their heroes could not. Admiral Collins held a final briefing before the next phase of operations. His words would haunt the Coalition officers for years to come. You wanted us to save your civilization. We're doing that. But understand that when this war ends, you'll have to live with the knowledge of what we did to save you. And you'll have to live with the fact that you asked us to do it. The galaxy was learning what Earth had always known. Sometimes to defeat monsters, you needed to become something even more monstrous. And humanity had been practicing that lesson for thousands of years. The war had been turning in favor of the Coalition for 3 weeks when General Kate Morrison arrived from Earth. She came aboard a massive transport ship carrying what humans called special assets, weapons and equipment that even the battle-hardened fleet officers had never seen before. Admiral Cathfar met with Morrison aboard the UES Vengeance. The human general was older than most of her officers, with gray streaks in her dark hair and the calm expression of someone who had seen too much war. She studied the star charts, showing Voidborn territory with the same attention most people gave to shopping lists. Admiral Collins tells me you've been making good progress, she said, without looking up from the displays. 43 enemy ships destroyed, 6 systems cleared. Not bad for 3 weeks of work? Your people have been very effective, Cathfar replied carefully. He had learned not to praise human military tactics too enthusiastically. It seemed to make them uncomfortable. Effective enough to win? Morrison asked. We believe so, given time. The Voidborn seem unable to adapt to kinetic weapons. Their ships are destroying them faster than they can reproduce or recruit new forces. Morrison finally looked up from the charts. Admiral, how many Voidborn are there in total? The question caught Kethvar off guard. We estimate perhaps 10,000 combat vessels across their entire territory. Why do you ask? It's because destroying 10,000 ships one at a time will take years. And while we're hunting them down, they'll be learning. Eventually, they'll figure out countermeasures to our kinetic weapons. So what do you suggest, Morrison? Activated a new display showing the Voidborn home cluster, a region of space where their species had originated millions of years ago. We end this war the way humans end wars, completely. The display showed Morrison's plan, something she called Operation Cleansing Fire. Instead of hunting individual Voidborn ships, the human fleet would assault the enemy home cluster and deploy a weapon designed to turn the Voidborn feeding process against itself. You want to attack their home territory? Kethvar asked in amazement. That's where their main fleet is concentrated. Thousands of ships, which is exactly why we're going to attack it, Morrison replied. When you want to kill a disease, you don't treat the symptoms, you destroy the source. Dr. Rachel Collins, who had been working on captured Voidborn technology, explained how the weapon would work. We've learned that the Voidborn feeding process creates a quantum resonance in their energy matrix. If we can amplify that resonance and broadcast it on the right frequency, we can cause a cascade failure. What kind of cascade failure? Asked Lieutenant Commander Zara. The kind that turns their feeding process into a chain reaction of self-destruction. They'll literally consume themselves. The Coalition officers stared at the weapon schematics in horror. It wasn't just a bomb or a gun. It was a device designed to corrupt the very nature of Voidborn existence, turning their life process into a death spiral. This is genocide, whispered Commander Tech-9. You're talking about exterminating an entire species. Morrison looked at him with the same expression. She might use for a child asking why the sky was blue. Yes, that's the point. But they're sentient beings. They have a right to exist. They forfeited that right when they decided to eat your civilization, Morrison replied coldly. This isn't about rights or philosophy. This is about making sure this never happens again. The plan required a coordinated assault by the entire human fleet, supported by what remained of Coalition forces. Commander Paul Wright would lead the assault teams that delivered the resonance weapon to the Voidborn home cluster. His briefing revealed the full scope of human military thinking. We're not here to defeat them, Wright explained to the Joint Task Force. We're not here to capture territory or negotiate terms. We're here to make sure the Voidborn cease to exist as a threat to any civilized species, now or in the future. What about survivors? Asked one Coalition officer. What about Voidborn who might want peace? Wright looked at the officer like he had asked about negotiating with a hurricane. There won't be any survivors. That's the point of the operation. The Coalition delegates finally understood what they had done by calling for Earth's help. They had invited a species that approached warfare not as a contest between opponents, but as a problem requiring a permanent solution. Dr. Alex Turner, now serving as liaison between human and Coalition forces, tried to explain humanity's perspective. During a private meeting with Admiral Kethvar, you have to understand where we come from, Turner said. On Earth, we've faced extinction dozens of times. Ice ages, asteroid impacts, plagues, wars. Each time, we survived by being willing to do whatever it took. Not whatever was honorable or civilized, whatever it took. But surely there must be limits to what you consider acceptable. Turner was quiet for a long moment. Admiral, humans spent thousands of years fighting each other. We know what it means to face an enemy that won't stop, won't negotiate, and won't coexist. When you find an enemy like that, you have two choices. You destroy them completely, or they destroy you. And the Voidborn are such an enemy, based on your own reports? Yes, they don't want your territory or your resources. They want to consume you. There's no middle ground with an enemy like that. As the human fleet prepared for Operation Cleansing Fire, Coalition officers watched in fascination and horror at the scale of the preparation. Every human ship was loaded with enough weapons to destroy a small moon. The assault teams trained for scenarios that involved fighting through thousands of enemy vessels to reach a single target. Captain Elisa Brooks led combat drills that the Coalition observers found disturbing to watch. Human Marines practiced boarding actions, where the objective wasn't to capture enemy positions, but to plant explosives and evacuate before everything was destroyed. "Why don't you try to capture prisoners?" asked Commander Tech 9 during one drill. "What would we do with them?" Brooks replied. "We can't negotiate with energy parasites. We can't rehabilitate them. We can't coexist with them. The kindest thing we can do is make their deaths quick." Major Tim Foster oversaw the loading of the resonance weapon, a device that looked deceptively simple for something designed to commit genocide. Coalition scientists who studied its design came away shaken. "It's elegant," one of them reported. To Kethvar, "Horrifyingly elegant. It uses the Voidborn's own biology against them. They'll die the same way they've been killing us, by having their life force drained away. Is there any way to limit its effects? To spare some of them?" The humans specifically designed it to be absolute. No exceptions, no survivors, no possibility of recovery. When this weapon activates, every Voidborn in the home cluster will die. The night before the operation launched, General Morrison held a final briefing with all human and coalition officers. Her words would be remembered by everyone who heard them. "Tomorrow we end this war," she said. "Not by defeating the enemy or forcing them to surrender. We end it by making sure the enemy no longer exists. Some of you find this approach disturbing. That's understandable. But remember why we're here." She activated displays showing the dead worlds the Voidborn had consumed. Billions of coalition citizens who had been drained of life, entire civilizations reduced to empty space. The Voidborn made the choice to wage a war of extermination. We're simply better at it than they are. Admiral Collins took over the briefing to discuss tactical details. The plan was complex, but brutal in its simplicity. The human fleet would punch through the Voidborn defenses, deploy the resonance weapon, and retreat before the cascade effect began. "How long will the weapon take to work?" asked Zara. "Approximately 6 hours for complete species termination," replied Dr. Collins. "The effect will spread through their quantum communication network, ensuring no Voidborn anywhere in the galaxy survives the cascade." The Coalition officers sat in stunned silence. They were about to witness the complete extinction of a species, carried out by their allies, with the same methodical precision used for any other military operation. "Are there any questions?" Kay Morrison asked. Admiral Kethvar raised his hands slowly. "General, after this is over, how do we live with what we've done?" Morrison's expression didn't change. "The same way we've always lived with necessary evils, Admiral. We remember that the alternative was worse." The briefing ended with final preparations for humanity's ultimate solution to the Voidborn problem. In 12 hours, the galaxy would be safe from the ancient threat that had consumed so many worlds. But the Coalition would never be the same after watching their saviors commit perfect, efficient genocide in the name of peace. Operation Cleansing Fire began at 0600 Galactic Standard Time. The combined human and Coalition fleet jumped into the Voidborn home cluster, where thousands of enemy ships waited in the darkness between dead stars. What happened next would be studied by military historians for centuries to come. The Voidborn had been expecting an attack. Their entire remaining fleet was positioned in defensive formations around their ancient homeworld. But they had prepared for the kind of war the Coalition fought. Careful engagements with energy weapons and tactical retreats to minimize casualties. They were not prepared for humans. Admiral Jake Collins led the assault from the UES Vengeance, supported by 11 other human battle cruisers. The Coalition fleet stayed back to provide covering fire and witness what their allies were about to do. As the human ships charged into the heart of enemy territory, Admiral Kethvar watched his displays in amazement. "They're not even trying." To avoid the enemy concentrations, breathed Lieutenant Commander Zara, flying straight into the largest Voidborn formations. The human ships punched through defensive lines like they didn't exist. Kinetic bombardments tore apart Voidborn vessels, while human fighters swarmed through the debris, hunting down survivors with ruthless efficiency. But this wasn't the methodical ship-to-ship combat the Coalition had seen before. This was something much more terrible. Commander Paul Wright led the assault teams carrying the resonance weapon toward the Voidborn homeworld. His ships fought through waves of enemy defenders, taking damage but never stopping. When Voidborn vessels tried to ram his transports in desperate suicide attacks, human escort ships intercepted them with their own ramming maneuvers. "They're sacrificing themselves to protect the weapon," observed Commander Tech-9. "Human crews are dying to ensure the mission succeeds." "That's what soldiers do," replied Major Tim Foster over the communication channel. His voice was calm, despite the fact that his ship was under heavy fire. "We complete the mission. Everything else is secondary." The battle raged for 3 hours. The Voidborn threw everything they had at the human fleet, but nothing could stop the steady advance toward their homeworld. Human ships that took critical damage didn't retreat. They continued fighting until they were destroyed. Buying time for others to push forward, Captain Lisa Brooks commanded the final assault on the Voidborn Command Center. Her ship, the EU's Predator, was heavily damaged but still functional when it reached the target zone. She and Wright worked together to deploy the resonance weapon, while enemy fire poured down on them from all directions. "Weapon deployed," Wright reported, beginning evacuation sequence. But the evacuation didn't go as planned. Voidborn forces had surrounded the human fleet, trapping them in the home cluster. Hundreds of enemy ships converged on the humans from all directions, determined to destroy the invaders even if it meant mutual annihilation. "Sir, we can't get out," reported Captain Helen Rodriguez from her stealth frigate. "They've got us surrounded. We're trapped here when the weapon activates." General Kate Morrison, monitoring the battle from the EU's Vengeance, studied the tactical situation. The resonance weapon would activate in 2 hours. When it did, every Voidborn in the cluster would die, but so would any human ships still in the area. "All ships," this is Morrison, "prepare for Option 0. The Coalition officers didn't know what Option 0 meant, but the human crews clearly did. There was no panic, no protests, just quiet acknowledgments from ship after ship. "What's Option 0? Cathfar asked over the communication channel. Morrison answered without emotion. "Total mission commitment. We stay here and make sure the weapon works. Our ships will be destroyed when the cascade begins, but the Voidborn will be extinct. You're talking about suicide. We're talking about completing the mission. The weapon has to be protected until it activates. If we retreat and the Voidborn somehow disable it, this was all for nothing." The Coalition watched in horror as the human fleet formed a defensive perimeter around the resonance weapon. Some of them might have made it out of the cluster before the cascade effect began. Instead, they chose to stay and fight to ensure the weapon's success. For the next 2 hours, the humans held their ground against impossible odds. Voidborn ships attacked in waves, trying to reach the weapon and destroy it before it could activate. Human vessels fought until their hulls cracked and their weapons failed, then rammed enemy ships to clear the way for their surviving comrades. Dr. Rachel Collins, working frantically to monitor the weapon's activation sequence, provided regular updates to both fleets. Resonance cascade building. Quantum alignment at 60%. 1 hour to activation. The battle grew more desperate as time ran out. Human ships that had fought through dozens of engagements finally began to fail under the constant assault, but they never retreated. Every ship that was destroyed took multiple Voidborn vessels with it. Cascade at 80%. 30 minutes to activation. Admiral Collins, his flagship badly damaged and most of his escort vessels destroyed, sent a final message to the Coalition fleet. "Admiral Cathfar, this is our last transmission. The weapon will activate in 28 minutes. Make sure you're clear of the blast zone. Admiral, there has to be another way. We can send ships to help you escape." Collins actually laughed. "Admiral, we didn't come here to escape. We came here to end this war. Mission accomplished." The resonance weapon activated exactly on schedule. Dr. Collins had calculated the effects perfectly. The quantum cascade spread through the void-born communication network like a virus, reaching every member of their species simultaneously. In the home cluster, the effect was immediate and absolute. The Coalition fleet, watching from a safe distance, saw the entire cluster light up as the cascade began. Every void-born ship simply stopped moving as their crews died. The massive enemy fleet that had been fighting desperately just moments before became a ghost, armada drifting in empty space. But the weapons effects didn't stop there. Reports came in from across the galaxy as the cascade reached void-born forces. Everywhere. On the frontier worlds, enemy ships went dark. In the Outer Rim, void-born feeding stations fell silent. Within 6 hours, as Dr. Collins had predicted, the void-born ceased to exist as a species. The war was over. The galaxy was safe. But the cost had been terrible. The entire human assault fleet, 12 battle cruisers, 60 fighters, and 3,000 of Earth's best soldiers had been destroyed in the cascade. They had known this would happen, and they had stayed anyway to ensure the mission succeeded. When the cascade effects finally faded, Coalition ships entered the dead cluster. To search for survivors, they found none. The resonance weapon had killed every living thing in the area, voidborn and human alike. Admiral Kethvar stood on his bridge, looking at the graveyard that had once been the heart of voidborn civilization. Thousands of empty ships drifted in. The darkness, testament to the efficiency of human warfare. They did it, Zara whispered. They actually did it. The voidborn are gone. 3 days later, the remaining human ships arrived from Earth to begin the long journey home. The new fleet commander, Admiral Susan Blake, met with coalition leaders to discuss the aftermath of the war. Your people saved us all, Kethvar told her. They sacrificed themselves to protect our entire civilization. Blake nodded calmly. They did their job. The threat has been eliminated. That's what matters. How can you be so calm? 3,000 humans died to activate that weapon, and billions of coalition citizens are alive because of their sacrifice. From our perspective, that's an acceptable exchange. The coalition began the long process of rebuilding their shattered worlds, but they also began implementing changes. That would have been unthinkable before the war. Military academies started teaching human tactics. Defense systems were redesigned based on human weapons technology. The peaceful coalition had learned that sometimes survival required monstrous choices. Dr. Alex Turner, now serving as Earth's ambassador to the coalition, received a new distress signal 6 months after the war ended. Another species from a distant part of the galaxy was calling for help against an ancient threat that had awakened from long slumber. Turner looked at the message, then at the rebuilt coalition worlds around him. The aliens had learned much from their human allies. They were building harder defenses, training more ruthless soldiers, preparing for wars they hoped would never come. They're calling for saviors again, he noted in his report to Earth. I don't think they'll make the same mistake twice. They're learning to be their own monsters. The final entry in Turner's diplomatic log summarized humanity's impact on galactic civilization. Mission accomplished. Threat eliminated. Galaxy saved. Cost acceptable. At effect, we taught a peaceful civilization how to fight wars the way humans fight wars. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing remains to be seen. The coalition had called for heroes and received killers. They had asked for saviors and gotten monsters. But they were alive, their civilization intact, their children safe from the ancient hunger that had threatened to consume everything they had built. In the end, that was what mattered. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson about survival, taught by a species that had been practicing it longer than most civilizations had existed.